This is as far as I have got with my fishing boat. There's lots of elements here that you could use in collage. This is collage. This section is collage. And if I wanted to, you could probably even start using little details like this in collage. It's really up to you personally what you want to do. To explain how I created the overhead bars or rigging on the fishing boat, these bits here. You could cut out bits of paper with scissors, couldn't you, and just stick them on if you wanted to. It's entirely up to you. What I did was to make sure I get a nice crisp line, which you can't probably see very well because I've got the light shining on. So what I'll do is I'll underline it with a pencil for you. So because this is a mixed media painting, anything, and it's your study, anything goes. I'm just trying to keep my head out of the way. There you go. So if I just underline that, but there's nothing to stop you from using pencils or to get it the way that you want it on the top. So you can start to hatch down here and getting this darker so that it's coming up through. So we'll start down here and finishing this area off. And what I was trying to say to you was that I used a credit card, or you could use a cut-off piece of paper or the edge of a ruler to make these marks, and that's how you can get a really nice straight line rather than trying to paint it with a brush. You could use a chisel brush if you wanted to, but just by picking things up and just dotting on, this is how you can get some really nice sharp edges or sharp lines. So what I will do now is I'm going to paint on all this netting here, and we are going to use some scraping marks to suggest this netting because it's such small fine detail. We're going to suggest this rather with a couple of scrapings rather than attempting to do it in all high fine detail. We're not going to do that, or I'm not going to suggest that you do that. So the colour of the netting, I'm hoping you've got a colour photocopy. It looks like a lovely bright Satsuma colour. So we're going to need, if you've got a tube of orange paint, you can use some orange paint. If you don't have it, then you can achieve this colour orange by mixing your cadmiums together. So I've actually got an orange colour, Pyroxylone orange. Have any of you got orange in your colour palette, or do you need to help you mix it? Just your cadmium red and your cadmium yellow, and you'll make a lovely bright cadmium orange. And we're going to add just a speck of white to it, not much at all. And then what I would like you to do is you're going to need your piece of card or the edge of credit card or the edge of a ruler, or you could use a palette knife. And we're going to scrape this on. You can even use, if you don't have any of those things, you could even use another tube of paint. So I've just dipped my tube of paint and I've just covered it with my orange acrylic, and I'm drawing with my tube, and I'm just going to fill it in. So this is the edge of my tube, and I've just put the edge of this. So if you don't have a ruler, if you don't have a card, don't worry, you can use another tube of paint, and I've just used the edge of my tube just to pull it down to make the edge. And because you're pulling it down, you can make some nice ridge marks when you're pulling this down. You can then pick up a tiny little bit more white, okay? So you're pulling it down. You don't want that mark there, so I'm just going to wipe that one off. There you go. And I'm just pulling this down. So the reason why I've done this is you've got lots of texture and lots of grooves. So I'm going to do it again. So the next one starts here, and then I can just pull it down. There we go. Just like that. You should get some really nice, and because you're pulling it down, you get some really nice scraping marks going down. Now, where you've got the threaders behind, this is a bit see-through at the back, so I've actually scraped in. I might put some orange back in it actually. I've actually scraped in a slightly darker colour just to give it some movement coming round. It's going back up again. There we go. There we are, and that is my suggestion for the netting. I'm going to let that settle and dry a bit. And now we've got this area here with all this netting. So we can start to work into this with a nice bright green, and again we can reuse the orange, cadmium orange, and start to perhaps do a few baubles to suggest the floats. So I'll leave that lying there for you as a reference. So that green that we've got on our picture is a very lovely bright green. So I would be looking at picking up a phthalo green. So you want that cold green. Cool. If you don't have phthalo green, if you've got phthalo blue and lemon yellow, you will achieve the same colour. So I've got phthalo green, but I can lighten it up even more by adding a lemony colour, some cadmium-y lemon, or as long as it's lemony. And then you might need to add a speck of white to it, you can lift it a bit more, so you end up with that nice turquoisey green colour. Okay, so you can see the connections there. All right, so we can just, as I say, pull the colour on. We can just do it this way if you wanted to. Can you see? And then I can just scrape it as well. Actually, pull it on. You could use a palette knife. You could use a bit of paper. Okay, and just by pulling it on, just do a little dab. There we go, and there's a bit there, and then there's a bit along here. So I might just get my scraper. Let's use a bit of a ruler this time. And you just see by scraping it, you get a really great effect. And you can sort of put it quite thinly. And then pulling it down. Like that. That's using a ruler. And by scraping it, I've made it thinner, and I've given it these sort of ruffles and textures on it. So that's why I've not used my brush, because if I painted this in, look, it goes like a solid blob, and I've killed it now. You see that? That's me painting it in with a paintbrush. But I want to get some nice scrapey texture like this up above. So I got my ruler and I've scraped it and pulled it down. Look. Now it's looks more interesting, and it's giving us that illusion of a rippling net, and it's much easier to do as well. So it's all plus plus plus. So just scrape it down and pull it, and you get these really nice marks. Just pull and scrape. Pick up a little bit more and just pull and scrape. It doesn't matter if your netting's not in exactly the same position. The main thing is, to make, the main thing is for you to be happy with what's in your picture. That's more important than the photograph. Now I'm going to go back to my orange, and I'm going to scrape this way. Because I can see a bit of orange around there. So I'm not using a brush at all at the moment. I'm just scraping with my ruler. So now that we've got that texture on, it's up to us how much detail we want to put in. I think I'm going to suggest a few of these floats around here, and perhaps a little bit of this darkness. So we've got this little dark edge down here, haven't we? Which you might be able to put in, and then the odd detail. So we're very nearly there. We'll put this, because we've got orange on our palette, we'll paint this rusty old oil drum. So if you keep with your cadmium orange that you now have on your palette and add some more white to it, you might need to add a little speck of burnt sienna to it. Just the merest hint, and you're probably going to need to add some more white to it as well. So I'm picking up my orange and my burnt sienna to get a colour that I'm fairly interested in. Okay, so you'll notice if I paint this on now, there's a couple of alterations that I'm going to need to make to this. So I've painted that, and if you look at the illustration, it is paler. So I can blend on the surface by adding some paler colour to it. Okay. So I can do that quite easily to lift it. But notice, because I've painted this with a brush, that it looks very smooth, and the object that we're trying to copy isn't, it's rusty. So we can do the same effect that we've just done with the netting, we can repeat here. So if I just pull this a bit and then scrape a bit back around the top, just with the ruler, you could use, again, a piece of card. Okay, I'm just scratching up the surface, and now I have a lovely rusty textured looking container rather than a smooth one. So this is where acrylics come in really useful, because you can scratch and scrape things. I'm going to need to put this dark colour in here now, and so we're going to need some burnt umber. Right, so now we need to get this dark tone in underneath our container. So we've got our burnt umber, but it's a burnt umber on its own is very bright, or it's pure. We need to contaminate it because it might just visually sit forward. So if I just try that in for you. Okay, it's not dark enough and it's looking a bit smooth, and we can just put a blob there if we do. And there, I wanted to. So it's not dark enough there. So if I take my burnt umber and go over to a nice dark blue, okay, I can now there we go. So now it's showing up as a nice dark shape. So now I have a white patch here, and in that area we have a table, which I'm not going to bother putting in, but we have a flat board behind it, and then we've got a lobster pot, and then some another pot there, and some other bits of tarpaulin or fabric or something like that. So we can continue this mark making along here. So this, we need to get rid of this. So if you pick up your cadmium yellow and the tiniest bit of the green you use for the netting and add it to the white, you're going to get sort of a neutral colour, sort of a mucky golden colour, which happens to be the colour of the board. Okay, but this at the moment, if you notice, is flat and the board drops at an angle. So I'm going to need to change that, because otherwise it's just, you know, visually your eyes going, what is that? So it needs to drop like this behind the board, and then it's disappearing like that, and then we can have our pot coming round like this, and then we've got another one, a little gap. So I just move that slightly, and then we've got some mucky stuff around there, something. Okay, so I'm going to need to add some red there. I don't know whether you need to do that in your pictures or not. You may not need to. So I'm just doing that, and I can drop in the tonal values a bit more in a minute, a bit later on. Just doing that just to obliterate the colour of it for the moment. There we go. That's better. So let's paint these lobster pots. So we're going to use our burnt umber, and we're going to make a suggestion that they're pots. We're not going to draw any of the detail on them. So whenever I've got something complicated like this, I think we'll probably scratch out the diamond marks, or just to make a suggestion of them, okay? Just to make them textured, just like we've done here with the scraping and with the netting where we've done scraping with our card. We'll do this effect here with this lobster pot, okay? Because we're not going to be able to get down into minuscule detail. So at the moment I've just got my umber, and I've just softened it by using this colour, this pale biscuity colour. So first step first is to do the ellipse, roughly. And if you squint at that pot, it's looking lighter there. So if I pick up that funny creamy biscuity colour, okay, and then I've got a lighter colour. In fact, that's probably slightly dark, but Okay. And just to help me, I haven't really attempted to, I'm not going to attempt to put that in yet. I'll show you how to do some textures on that. So we can see in this painting, in this area here, I can see a flash of, I think, green tarpaulin or something, or sheeting. So I'm going to put that in. So I'm going to go to the green that we used earlier, and I'm going to contaminate it with that umber that we've been using. And I'll show you what my messy palette looks like. So here is my green, and over here is my orange, my burnt sienna, my white, which was giving me my biscuity colour. Okay, and now I can lift it a little, go over to the green, so I get this sort of pale greenish colour, but it's a dirty greeny colour because it's a washed out, bleached bit of sheeting that we're looking at over in the far right hand side. So I can paint it in this area that I want, and I can go into the area where the lobster pot is, because it's going into there and then it's disappearing out of shot. So we'll just make something up, okay, like that, and we could have another bit of sheeting here if we wanted to, just completely made up. I'm just going to lighten that little bit more, so I've got this sort of dirty white car just to define the top of the pots. And I need to get rid of this bit here. There's a shadow there. Let's put that shadow in, because this pot that I've roughly put in, it's not going to show up until it has that dark shadow behind it. Okay, so that dark shadow is from the fishing boat, and it is based on a burnt umber. Because it's in shadow, it's contaminated and also looking a bit dull. So I've gone over to my burnt umber, and I'm using this spot here, and I've added some white paint to it, so I'm sort of getting a sort of pale mocha colour. And then I want to cool it down, so if I go over to my dark blue, probably my phthalo blue, I'm now getting a nice greyish tone. All right, so that is the colour that I'm going to use for this shadow over here, which is behind my pots. And just colour it in behind there. But it does go about there, I think, and there it goes down. And then it sort of disappears, so we'll just forget about that. And then we've got some shadow here, so we need to put a line in here. And I'm smudging with my finger. This is where another thing that's quite satisfying to do. You can get a sort of a sheer shadow with acrylics, so you can get it to where you want it, like that. And then I'll paint that in, and then we'll start doing some dark bits. So we'll squeeze out some more umber. So we're now going to be using shadows, and I'll probably go down to a smaller brush to pick out a few dark bits. So I'm going to use my burnt umber and probably my phthalo blue to get it really, really dark, because the two together are going to make it quite a cool black. So don't, the blue that is very powerful, so don't go too much. So this is almost looking black. and I can just do a blob there. What have we got? We've got some dark blobs here. And we've got some rigging here, so we'll do a little bit of that in a minute, but we'll just do that quite sure. So we've got a couple of bits here, so do some dots there. So I'm just very lightly just tapping. Oh, there's a dark bit there. So I'm just tapping it in. I'm not going to attempt to do any sort of detail. It's just what we want, just to suggest something. Because we've got lots of little dark dots. Bits there. Yeah, that one there. Right, then we're going to go around here. Right. So my brush is now quite dry-ish. And what I'm going to do to suggest that hatching across there, I'm going to swipe my brush very lightly. So I want this brush to be quite dry, because I don't want to, and I'm going to be touching the surface incredibly lightly, so I can almost hatch in suggestions of the fact that it's a see-through pot. So rather than painting it solidly, I'm just ever so lightly scraping the surface, and I'm trying to hatch the detail in with a few taps with my paintbrush that's almost dry. So I'm beginning to get the suggestion of an open weave basket. So you want to make sure your brush is really dry. So I'm just tapping it on. I haven't recharged my brush. I'm just scraping it on ever so lightly, so I can start to suggest something. Okay. And that hopefully should be enough. You can do the occasional blob here and there. Should be enough for the brain to work out that that's something with netting on it. You can do a little bit on that side if you want to, but should be enough. It's just a hint of something like that. Don't think there's much more that needs to be done there, apart from a few buoys with the floats. Right, I will now go over to my orange, and I'm going to add some white to it, and I might add a tiny bit of more yellow to it actually, because they're looking quite golden, these buoys or floats. So wherever you think you want one, we can now pick up our brush. It's quite loaded, and we'll just do a blob away there. Float. Okay, so there's one. And then I'm going to suggest another one there and another one there. Might put a little bit more orange in this bit, so I'm ever so lightly stroking the surface of my paint so I can just blob on a few. Otherwise we've got some pale netting through here, so I'm just dragging it with my brush. And then we've got, oh yeah, we've got some floats here just going out of the picture. So we could think about these just like we would berries, really. Yeah. So what we would do is we'd look at the tonal differences. So at the moment I've just put one colour on for these little floats, so they just look like one colour. If you look at the photograph, you'll see that these boys have a dark shadow underneath them around the edge. So we need to do a shadow underneath. So we need a slightly deeper orange colour, and I've added some burnt sienna to it so it's not too pure, it needs to be slightly contaminated. So that when I go around them, and the same there, they will start to look three-dimensional. Again for that one, make it slightly stronger colour on that side, and we could probably just do a little tiny dot there. Okay, so just by doing taps and things, we're creating the impression of all this netting, rather than trying to think of all the painstaking detail. Because we've done all these lovely drag marks coming down, our brain understands what it's looking at, and it's telling us, oh, this looks like netting or fabric that's dragging down. And because you've scraped in some areas, the background is coming through, so it's showing that it's not a solid colour. So the last thing that we could probably do is obviously add a bit more of the rigging in here, which we'll do in a second, and perhaps do a bit more texture in the foreground. And then that's probably it, really. So I'm hoping you can see that with this one I did a very loose thin wash, and I randomly dragged my brush in all directions to make sure I had a scumbled surface. So I rolled it around and tapped it, okay? So that I would encourage you to do some more of that. If you feel there's not enough texture in your foreground, pick up a bit of yellow, so you've got a nice sort of golden colour, okay? So this is a real technique that we try and do, or us artists try and do, and we want the foreground here to be more textured. So this is your opportunity if you want to do rolling around, tapping, scribbling around. Okay, so you've got more texture for the shingle or that the boat is on. Tapping it all over. Okay, let's put a little bit of that colour in the background. Okay, and then as it goes into the distance, we don't want to do the tapping here. This area here is smoother, it's much smoother over here and here. It's just this area in front of here. And by making it more swirly or scratching into it or tapping it around and flicking marks in all directions, okay, you can make suggestions of the shingle and the stones by doing all sorts of marks, and it begins to sparkle more visually in the eye, to the eye, by just having some subtle differences. Okay. I'm just tapping it with my finger just to make sure that this visually sparkles and looks more like stones. This, as you can see, if you put too much white on your finger, it goes like this. So if I break it up a bit, we don't want that, that's too solid. So I've been lightly tapping with a bit on. If I just get that off, there you go, with a tissue. There you go, it's gone. So now this at the front is capturing our eye more and looking how we want it, whereas in the background it's more smooth. So it's going that's another way of helping the background to recede into the distance by having this area smooth and this area textured. The other thing you'll notice is that on the horizon line here it's looking cooler. All right, so that's another effect that you can do. So by having this as a dirty umber with the blue to it, it's a cooler brownish colour, and this is much brighter, much warmer. So it helps bring it all visually forward and helps everything else disappear into the distance. I'm just going to put a bit of highlight back on that board again. There we go. Last things to do now are to work out where you want your rigging to go. So I'm just using a pencil at the moment, and we've got lots of lines coming down here. So I say, right, and you can obviously do as many as you want, just to give you a guide. So we've got a nice sweep from that point going from there. So we go like that. So I don't know whether you can see all of these lines here. That's another bar there. So I'll put that in for you and show you how I did it with a ruler. Oh, there's so much rigging in here, we probably have to put some of it in and perhaps leave other bits out. Depends how much time you've got, really. There are my lines. So we're going to need to go down to a smaller brush, really fine brush, and I am going into my burnt umber mixed with my blue, so it looks almost black. We just need a dark brownish colour, don't we? So we've got something dark there. So now that I've got my pencil lines down, I can use these as a guide to tap along or drag with my rope, drag my paintbrush, sorry, to create. So this is the chain. I'm not going to attempt to do the chain. You could, I suppose, just by doing little daps like this, making it a dappled line rather than a solid line. It can suggest something. And there's some blobby bits here, but I need to change my brush to a lighter one. Okay, so I've just got a very small, fine brush. Okay, so that's it. By rather than making it a constant dot, by doing these little dots on it, it's visually making it sparkle a bit, I suppose, or catch the eye rather than it being a solid line. So I recommend you have a go at doing that. And then I'm just going to change the colour slightly again, just making it more grey. And we've got a little flick going up to that one. And then we're going to have to pull. So with this one, I will go like that. Just make sure I'm not going at the wrong angle. There we go. That goes like that. So there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my ruler. Yeah. Just smooth that away with a little bit. And because it's a sharp edge, this is where it comes up really useful. And now I'm going to make it easy for myself. And say, right, okay. There's my line. Ta-da! Done that quickly. And then we want another line. Yeah. Okay. So I can immediately wipe that off with my thumb. That needs to be darker there, and that needs to be darker there. So let's just roughly put these bits and bobs in. So we've got some contraption here. And then we've got beam. Some contraption there. Don't worry about too much about trying to copy it. When I'm looking at, so I'm now looking at this area here, and I'm looking at doing just marks on the side of this area here. So I've got burnt sienna, but it's been contaminated. It's not pure, and it's got a bit of white added to it. Okay, and I'm just going to tap my brush on its side. And I'm going to just do a couple of lines and a vertical mark and a dash, because we can't really work out what all these shapes are. We know it's they're pulleys and riggings and all sorts of bits and bobs, but let's just, you know, make odd bits up so we know that it's something, but we're not quite, you know, we can just make this up, it's fine. I'm just going to go back a bit more. So it's just lots of little dots and dashes, really. And that's enough for us to sort of create an impression of something rather than try and work out in itty-gritty detail. So for these, I'm just going to do little dots, little tiny little dots. There'll be a port and starboard light. So you've got the red one below and the green one above, but obviously they're switched off, so you can't really see them very well. So we're going to have white that's contaminated, so it looks like a creamy white. And we have got lots of bits and bobs here. We've got something there and something on the other side. We've got that line down there. Oh, lots of things around here, but we won't put all those in. So even though this colour that I've got isn't 100% correct, I'm just literally using it to draw with. And there's another line in there, but I think we can probably leave that to be enough. So I'm just using burnt umber now. It's not pure, so I'm picking up the burnt umber, but it's got bits of the cadmium yellow in it, so it's more like a warm brown. Okay. So I'm literally just sketching the odd bit here and there. Oh, I've just spotted we've got a seagull at the end of the on board the boat. If we get our rigging, our ruler, sorry, I'm just picking up the colour. You can just do a print on there. I'm just using, so I'm scraping on top of my piece of collage to get, oh, that's really quite eye-catching, I like that. And then we've got something there. Let's look. We have got a triangle shape. Putting that in there with the chain going down. So I'm just going to probably suggest this window slightly, and we're probably nearly there, really. So when it comes to the rigging things, it's really useful, I find, to use the end of a piece of card or board, or as you say, a ruler. So, you know, if you wanted to suggest anything, you don't have, you could use the end of a chisel brush if you wanted to. It's really just whatever you want to do. So just by doing these little lines, I'm suggesting the cabin lines going down. Just as I've taught you before, because we've got all these ropes dangling down, I'm resting, when I'm painting these lines, which I've put in pencil, I'm resting my little finger on the surface and I'm holding my brush, so it's keeping my hand steady. It's a great way of getting a better fine line. If you remember when we do botanical work, you hold it up vertically. So if I'm always using my little pinky to rest on the screen, to rest on the paper, on the surface, I can then plant my brush at the top, okay, and then I can drag my hand down to better line. So I'm not moving my finger, I'm pulling my whole hand down. So I'm planting my hand at the top, I'm using my little pinky as a rest, and I'm just dragging it down, following the line, and dragging that and following the line down. I want it. So now I've got nice, smooth ropes or rigging lines. So that's something that's really, you'll find really useful to practice. Is resting your little finger on the surface and then pulling your whole hand down, and then you get much nicer marks for that. Okay, so I think we're probably there then, really. I can put the little bird in if you want me to. Oh, there's that one up there, isn't there? I've just noticed it. So that needs to be white. So I need to squeeze out some more white paint. So again, what you could do, you want to make sure, you can obviously show the way I've shown you, or as I say, pick up your ruler, apply the paint to your ruler or credit card, or piece of mount board or something like that. Okay, and have a go at saying, right, I just want it to be there. Press it down, and then there we go. I've got my rigging all nice and sharp. I need to extend this little tubular line here. Just notice that goes up to there. Just goes beyond it with a little white blob on the end. So I'll just do that. And then there's another little bit there. There you go, now it's connected. So there we are. So there's that study.